Good afternoon. What I wanted to talk about in this video is why sharpening is so important, and not just for the obvious reason that you're keeping your tools sharp. When I started woodworking, and I started using, when I first began woodworking, I had, like most woodworkers, I had some hand tools. I had a few chisels. I had a chop saw, and these were items that I purchased not really specifically to make furniture with, but because it was I bought a house. I got married, bought a house like a lot of people do, and of course there's a lot of projects around your house that you need to complete, and so you need tools. And when I first got married, most of the tools I owned were really mechanical, electrical tools, and only I owned those because of my job. And I had very basic. I had a couple hand saws, obviously hammers and things like that, but I didn't have tools that were really specific to woodworking, and more even a lot of specific carpentry tools for that matter. I had a lot of typical things that everybody is going to have when they own a house: a square. I had a drywall square, things like that. But when I first started buying tools specifically to woodwork with, I had always I never was and I hate these words, I hate these phrases, but I was never a machine woodworker, nor was I a hand tool woodworker. I gravitated towards hand tools just because I had said before, when I was first got married, I saw the Richard Prentice Alone in the Wilderness documentary, and I was fascinated by that. And I started reading his journals, and when they started releasing those, the Park Service started releasing them, I started reading them more and more, which I may or may not have mentioned on this blog before, or this in my blog before, or on video. One of the reasons I got into volunteering with the Park Service was not just my proximity to several national parks in this area, but because when I ordered, when Richard Prentice's second set of journals was released, the Park Service were the people who released it, and I had emailed the Lake Clark, the visitor center actually. And funny thing is an actual when the book became available, a ranger actually called me and let me know that it was ready, and so I placed the order and we got it shipped, and the rest was history. So it was like a really good experience with them, and I wanted it to continue, and I began volunteering at local parks. Like Valley Forge is my favorite, and I volunteered there many times, and it's just something I enjoy, and as long as I'm physically capable, I'm going to keep doing it. But regardless of all of that, the reason I wanted to talk about sharpening sharpening and its importance is because when I first started woodworking, as I was alluding to, and I got sidetracked there, I didn't know really. I knew in theory, I knew the theory behind sharpening a tool like a chisel, and a pocket knife for that matter, but I can't say that I was very good at it. So I bought a guide, and I said I'll say it before I said it before, I'll say it again. Guides are fine. I have nothing against them. In particular, if you have problems with your hands, you have problems with your grip, that type of thing. I know all too well the issues that comes with getting older and having problems with your hands. Believe me, it is a burden. But this spoon is really soaking up the water. But what I do have one issue with guides, and that is using a guide in freehand sharpening. I don't care about the whole argument of one takes still and one doesn't. All that nonsense. That means nothing to me. But what freehand sharpening does teach you is tool control. It teaches you how to be steady with your hands and how to maintain pressure, knowing when to alleviate pressure, those things. That, to me, is a skill that's invaluable. And it translates not just to just chisels and plane irons, but everything that you do in terms of woodworking, especially if you're like me and you use hand tools because you really don't have the space to set up a full power tool shop. But what it does, it teaches you a level of control that is really important down the road. What I don't really know the best way to articulate it, except like when I was a kid, the Phillies are in the World Series, and I told you I grew up in Philadelphia. I'm a baseball fan. When I was a kid, I was pretty good, decent athlete, pretty good baseball player. In my house growing up, my dad was actually a really good baseball player when he was younger, and even into his 30s. But that was what we did in my house. Is we played is baseball. We watched baseball and played baseball, and boxing was the other popular sport when I was younger. And my dad, I would argue, especially as I got older, with the way you argue with your dad, I would argue with my dad about natural gifts versus practice, honing your talent. My dad had this idea that for instance, a great pitcher in baseball is great through his genetics, through this natural ability. Now there is some truth to that. There are certain people that are just genetically predisposed to, they're going to be a better basketball player, a better football player, and not just to use sports as an example, better artist, better runner, things like that. It just any ability that takes an innate skill. There is certainly a natural predisposition for certain people to just excel at certain activities. This is the way it is. But even then, I tried to explain to my dad many times, even as I got older, that even that innate ability needs to be honed to a high level, and everything that you do in life is part of that honing. For instance, like as I said, I was a pretty decent baseball player when I was younger, and I used to spend hours, not just me, like my friends as well. I used to spend hours, throwing a ball, a hard ball up in the air and hitting it. The typical thing a lot of kids, and especially in my generation, would do. And I'd spend hours laying on my back in at our little local in-yard park, we called it, and throwing the ball up in the air as high as I could and trying to get it to land in a certain spot. Like a lot of little things like that. And same with boxing. Like I used to hit a heavy bag for hours. All of those little things you do add up. And when you get older and you start to hit your athletic prime, all of those little moments really are what define your skill. And that's something my dad had never really grasped, I guess. But what I'm getting at is when you're learning how to sharpen freehand, you're not just getting your tool sharp. You're really learning control. You're learning how to handle your tools. And that's why I think it's so important to at least try to freehand sharpen. It is something that I wish I had done earlier. I didn't really start freehand sharpening until probably at least 5 years ago. Maybe a little, maybe 5 or 6 years ago. But it was several years after I started woodworking seriously, where I started making furniture, and not just little projects like birdhouses and planter boxes, but real furniture with real design attributes, different thicknesses of wood, real joinery, arches, things like that, curves, things that made furniture stand out from just being a box or 4 legs and a table to actually having some substance. Trying to get this to, it's almost there. That edge should be a little bit more polished. But yeah, this is what I'm getting at here is, if it's, I wish I had a real camera and a real setup here. You'd be able to maybe see what I'm talking about. I'm not going to tell you I have the arms and hands and dexterity of a surgeon. His days are long gone. That ship has sailed. But you could probably see that my hand and wrist is pretty steady and locked. When I first started sharpening, I know for a fact that I would sharpen. I'm going to try to, and it would almost be like a rocking, making a cove almost. And it wasn't. It was just the byproduct of me not developing that muscle memory, not developing that touch, that feel that you get without practice or with practice. So it really, besides, the obvious fact is you're getting your tools ready to use. That's if you're going to sharpen for no other reason than that. But what you're really doing too, when you're freehand sharpening, at least this is my opinion, what you're really doing is, you're training your hands to be steady, to have muscle memory, even a certain strength. It's almost like an exercise. I've argued before, and I'm not just arguing this, I'm right. A lot of people say, well, woodworking is my exercise. So, oops. They'll say woodworking is my exercise. Well, certainly it's better than nothing. But the one issue that I've found, if you think you're going to come in to your little garage shop or your workshop and saw some dovetails, and that means that you got your cardiovascular and your strength workout for today, you're dead wrong. You'll notice here I've been sharpening this chisel for a few minutes. I used my right arm, my right hand, almost exclusively. That's why it's not a great workout, because most woodworkers, they use one. They're dominant with one hand. And I'm the same way. Um, I told you before, I'm a little bit unusual in the sense that I throw with my left hand, my left arm. I do everything else right-handed. But when I woodwork, I do almost everything right-handed, and that's why you really can't count on woodworking to be your sole source of exercise. But I used to go to the gym quite a bit until I have old man disease, which is tendonitis in my right arm. And if you've never had that, it's really fun. It ends up being a pain right here, whatever this muscle might be, and it goes up back through your triceps all the way up into my neck. And it's once again one of those happy, fun aspects, gifts you get when you get older. Let's see how sharp this chisel is. It's nice and sharp, which it really, I have gloves on obviously, but I can just feel it, and very smooth too. This is pine, but pine does require sharp tools as well. I actually shouldn't have put away this water stone here. I'm going to try something now that we're on video here. I said many times before, sorry about this. I said it, I don't have my setup is beyond amateur here when it comes to filming. But I came straight from work into the garage here. So I'm once again washing clothes. But this is the knife I use at work all the time. So I'll see if I can sharpen it. I said I rarely, as in almost never, use water stones to sharpen pocket knives, but I'll try it here. They for some reason I get this feeling that I'm going to mess up the stone. That might sound crazy. This is I guess they would call this tanto because it has that little, I don't know, it's whatever it is, it makes it a little bit more difficult to sharpen than a typical pocket knife. Now this is pretty sharp to begin with, but it does need a honing. I know that because when I left work today, I tried to cut a sheet of paper with it, and it sort of started tearing into it. So that's when I usually know that I need to give it a quick sharpening. And even this, just like sharpening a chisel, it does teach you control, an extremely important skill when it comes to woodworking. Now let's go backwards. This always throws me. Don't know why, it just does. Sorry, I'm a little close to the screen I can see here. Just like in sharpening a chisel, a plane iron, split shave requires a steady hand. Now we'll do the tip. A little bit higher, there we go. I can actually feel that it's not cutting right. I'll do it backwards. I'm not sure how many people here watched the World Series, the Baseball World Series. Last night the Phillies were shut out and no hit. The series is tied at 2. It's been pretty interesting so far. I don't watch sports nearly like I used to, but I still do follow it on occasion. And this is the stone that really I just had probably an unnatural fear of using for sharpening pocket knives. I was always afraid I was going to gouge it or no more water on there. I was always afraid I was going to put a big nick in it or something like that. I'll do this way. Now we'll do the tip. Actually, there you go. I put a little, very minor. I don't really care for these. I'm probably using the wrong word, but this Tanto style blade. I don't know what I'm sure there's some purpose for them. I just don't know what it is. See how we did. I used this piece of pine I was just messing with. Yeah, that's pretty sharp. Try the tip. The tip feels a little duller. Maybe I was just going against the grain. Yeah, still not too bad. The drain on this piece of pine is not great either. Going backwards is a bad idea, but yeah, I mean that's pretty sharp. I don't know if I have any paper around here. I'll try my notepad. Yeah, that's quite sharp. Tip. The tip is not, I mean it's sharp. This paper doesn't cut very well either, but it's sharp. It's not as sharp as this. That just goes right. Like it's nothing. I mean, not too bad. It's this little tip thing here. I like this knife because it's pretty hefty. I can use it at work to cut open like the plastic baling wire or tape, if you want to call it that, and it just goes right through it. But I do not care for this tip. And I mean, I got this knife free from the Milwaukee tool representative, so I can't really complain about it. But it's not my I don't like that style of blade, but I do like the fact that this knife can really just take a beating, and it is nice and sharp. There's no doubt about that. I just wish I could do this. And I just don't know what this tip is supposed to be for, but that's two. But yeah, my little sharpening sermon there is over, and I'll say it again: if you can, if you don't have any issues with your hands, your wrists. Consider learning how to freehand sharpen even some of your tools. Not even if you don't want to go that route. I know it is time consuming. It is sometimes a lot quicker to. I have a bench grinder over here at slow speed. It is sometimes quicker to boot and give it a couple passes on a strap and you're good to go. But I really think that if you put some time into freehand sharpening without a guide, it will benefit you not just with and the end result of a sharp tool, but also with using your hands, having control of your hands, having control of your tools. The other thing I wanted to talk about real quick is I think I might have mentioned this before. When I first built my first ever workbench, I followed, this is the Aldell's Builder's Guide. And I basically copied the bench in this book. I'll see if I can get it on string here. There it is. Forgive me here. Sorry about my camera work. But this bench here is basically the first bench I ever made. Except it did not have that leg vise. But the top, the 4x4 legs, the whole 9 yards, they provide measurements as well later in the book. There's the bench measurements. I'm sorry. There you go. You can see that. But the reason I bring this up is because I really think I heard my friend a few months back. He had mentioned some woodworking books he really enjoys on his woodworking blog, on his YouTube woodworking blog. And I was it's one of those things. Hey, if you have something that you found that works for you, maybe it's worth sharing. But these guides here from Aldell's are really nice. They don't just have woodworking tools per se. It's a combination of carpentry and woodworking tools. And not just what they are, but instruction on how to use them, how to sharpen, how to use tools like framing squares, speed squares, that type of thing. And there's just hundreds of different drawings, tips. I have this set of 4. I recommend the older. This is the, I think it's 1947 or 48 edition. Bear with me here. Okay, so this is the 1945 edition, but it was reprinted in 1948. And these books are really great resources. They're great research tools. They have just hundreds of pictures of different style hardware, nails, bolts, screws, anchors, and any woodworking carpentry tool you can think of here, from hand planes to bench planes, molding planes, all of your different joinery planes, saws, everything. Tips on sharpening, saws, tips. So it's a great resource. The only issue is there's this Aldell's put out dozens, if not hundreds, of books on all kinds of different trades. I'm lucky to have a fair amount of them. The carpentry / building set is a 4-book set. This set here, this edition, is not, unfortunately, it is not cheap anymore. I got mine for all 4 of them. I bought at an antique store for, I think it was no more. It was maybe $20, I think, for the whole entire set, including tax. I looked it up last night, and these sets, I've seen them run from $60 to several $100, depending on their condition and who was selling them. But this set here, this is a later edition of the same set, and they are updated. Let me look and see what year. I did not check. Okay, so this was printed in 1972, and it is a reprint of the 1970 and 1965 editions. Now, how these are different is some of the tools, like they've updated. You won't find as many molding points in here, for example. Certain, like this one here has instructions on how to make a miter box. This one does not. The workbench in this is a little bit more modern than that bench in here, which was a lot more traditional. However, it's still a really great resource. Almost all of the original the original information is in this edition as well. I was lucky, a guy I worked with before. He was in the Navy first and foremost, and was a machinist and a Navy machinist mate, and he had these books from then. He actually, these books have actually been to Vietnam, believe it or not. He gave me his whole set. I think I have maybe a dozen of them or so. And it's not just the builders. I mean, there's the builders sets. There's sets on boiler maintenance, machining, equipment, stuff like that. They're really neat books, even if you're not into that type of work. But the point being, the four builder set of this edition they're all over the internet. You can even buy them on Amazon, I believe, used and new. There are newer versions of these books, but the four book set here, this hardbound book set, is fairly inexpensive still. I've seen them selling for under $30 just this past week. So if you're really interested in just having a nice resource on hardware, tools, basic sharpening tips, that type of thing, these are excellent books to get, and I really highly recommend them. I find myself referencing them all the time. I even just, when I get bored, I look through them, especially the older books, because I like a lot of the drawings in here are a little bit different, and it's just one of those things that's really neat to look at. But otherwise, I hope you enjoyed this. I hope it was helpful. And get sharpening. You try it without a guide. Even if you have some old chisels, old plane irons, use those first, because when you first sharpen by hand without a guide, you will probably end up with a little bit of a wonky edge. I've been there, done that, but you do improve really quickly. And you'll find a real steadiness in your hands. You'll find you could trust your hands more, not just sharpening, but in other woodworking tasks like dovetailing, mortising, those type of things. It really does help you learn control, and that's why I really recommend it. So I hope you guys have a great night. Hope the Phillies win, and forgive me for stuttering. I've been awake since 5:30 this morning, and I just got home from work. So I've had a pretty long day, but I'm going to try to stay up and watch the fight tonight and hope they win. So have a great night, guys, and best of luck.